In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 42. Andrew and Jerry celebrate Festivus. I got a lot of problems with you people, Jerry. I'm Andrew Langer.
Jerry Rogers.
And Jerry certainly has a problem with you people. You remember those episodes of
I got a problem with everybody today.
Yes, the old episodes of the old podcast where Jerry would just show up in full lather about something, usually something related to DC and DC traffic. Yeah, Jerry is in full frothing mode today. We are going to have the airing of the grievances today, certainly, and there are a lot out there. We're going to talk about Britney Griner, and we're going to talk about Twitter, and we're going to talk. What else did you want to do? Something else they've got you all in a tizzy today, Jerry.
Everything, yeah. Right?
Kirsten Sinema.
She changing her status from Democrat to independent. Just imagine if the Republicans had kept the Senate seat in Pennsylvania, if they were competitive in Arizona, if they didn't nominate Herschel Walker in Georgia. I mean, this is
right.
This is absolutely ridiculous. And frankly, you know what? I know there are lots of conditions that created this very strange midterm 2022. But the one thing that's consistent, the one thing, I always say this, like in many of these big cities, it's a combination of factors why crime is rising. Yeah. It's myriad things. But if you had to choose one thing in New York, in Baltimore, in Philadelphia, right, in Chicago, it is the lax non-prosecuting prosecutors, the progressive prosecutors who refuse to enforce the law and to prosecute criminals. Well, when it comes to midterms 2022, there are myriad factors, but if we had to blame one thing or one person, it's Donald J. Trump. This guy delivered a reverse Midas touch midterms. Everything he touched turned to crap.
There is this narrative out there that if Donald Trump can't be president again, he won't be the Republican nominee, that he would be the last Republican president, something to that effect. Also, the other thing we want to talk about today, by the way, is the latest Sam Brinton story, the kook Department of Energy person. Listen, before we get too deep into things, Jerry, I do want to have there's one really bright spot out there. I have and of course you can't see it because of the backgrounds here. Let me
put it against your chest. There you go.
Yes, there we go. I have my William and Mary Tribe Football Cup.
I'm offended by that.
Quarterfinals are tonight, Jerry.
I'm offended by that. I think that's disrespectful to indigenous people.
Well, no. Remember, they are William and Mary is now a tribe of griffins. That's
it makes no difference. It's I think of tribe. It is anti-indigenous people. It is
William
racist.
and Mary was the
it's white.
For a long time.
It's white centric.
The point is, William and Mary football has reached the FCS quarterfinals for the first time in forever and a day. Tonight they play Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana at 8 p.m., which means it's 10:15 p.m. Eastern time. They're going to be playing in 20-degree weather, Jerry, with light snow possible. So we're keeping our fingers crossed for tribe football this evening. So it's a little bit of a
I really feel that this is an unsafe space. You keep on saying tribe. I'm going to
tribe. That's exactly right. Yes, it is the William and Mary tribe.
Well, Andrew, I'm sorry. I identify now. A big announcement here on the Andrew and Jerry Save the World podcast. I now identify as indigenous people.
So Jerry, you're saying you're going to give up your Irish American heritage and embrace your Native American heritage.
Listen, if
you want to, or does it really matter anymore?
Okay, if you want to say steeped in your white centricism that a word?
Eurocentric.
Whatever it is.
You're Eurocentric.
I am now, my pronouns are them and they, because I identify as a people group.
Yes.
And you know what? And I think the Irish, because of the oppression of the Irish people, they have much in common with the indigenous peoples and other oppressed peoples.
The movie in the line, The Proclaimers, right? Which where they go through the commitments, not the Proclaimers, the commitments.
Yes.
The Proclaimers.
So I now identify as every single put upon people group in the world.
So it's interesting because as you and I
I'm a tribe myself.
As you and I were conceiving of this show yesterday, and you were talking about sort of this airing of grievances and essentially the top issues that are facing America. You've drilled down to some very specific things. I've pulled it back to things like the dissolution of objective truth, which is something we have talked about.
The reign of relativism we talked about yesterday.
If we no longer because I was thinking about this yesterday with this issue of with the issue of Sam Brinton and him being able to just decide.
Well, again, tell our audience who this person is.
I should pull this up again. Yeah. So
this is the trans identifying non-binary, I guess, head of nuclear waste disposal in the Biden administration,
and I think
who was arrested for stealing luggage.
Is gender fluid, which is again which I someone can explain that to me. But the point is
so he identifies as water.
Yes, he was gender water, Jerry.
Really? And so whatever cup, whatever bowl he is poured into, he takes the shape and the form.
Shape of water, but not in the Bruce Lee Jeet Kune Do way.
Oh, exactly a very good pickup right there. Look at you.
Yes.
I was also thinking about Wonder Twins' power activate.
Yes.
But regardless, the Bruce Lee reference is water. Excellent.
And Gleek always had a bucket with him. Right?
Yeah, and why? I don't know why.
Which is Gleek, the Wonder Monkey. I
know. I know. You had to carry the water and something.
Carry the water with him when he was just the shape of water, shape of an ice arrow. But the point is that this guy Sam Brinton, so he was trotted out along with Rachel Levine.
Are you supposed to say he here? Again, very uncomfortable.
I think he identifies as he, though as a gender fluid. Maybe it's they. I don't know. That's not the point. The point is
maybe he's a heesh.
Yes.
Is that a new term? Can we hey, since we're doing this anyway, can we create our own
one? He was in the movie Gangs of New York.
What we ought to do is that we ought to just add to the language. Why not? This is what the left does.
Yes. So the point is that that a year ago, Sam Brinton was trotted out along with Rachel Levine, who is the Secretary of Health and Human Services,
Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services.
This, of course, is a man who now identifies as a woman. So I guess they are a trans woman.
They are, yes, an MTF trans woman. But anyway,
it's important. I think I'm going to start. Let me get a piece of paper and a pen so I can write all these terms down. So I can be inclusive and diverse in my language. Right.
And you get your social crediting for it. So you'll be able to travel down the road. But my point is that this person, Sam Brinton, was trotted out as this, the new generation of the kinds of leaders that progressives were going to promote. And again, he gets into the issues of relativism and defining your own truth, etc. So
and also let's be frank, let's be serious for 1 second. Mental health. I mean, this person is obviously, to be serious for a second and to look at this person who claims to be gender fluid, it's a mental health issue.
Well, yes, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. There are those of us who saw this appointment. We said, okay, there is something very, very wrong here, and we were, of course, called transphobic and bigoted and whatever. Story breaks last week, maybe it was the week before last, that someone was caught stealing a Louis Vuitton suitcase from a luggage carousel at Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. And they identified the person as Sam Brinton. Sam Brinton's called. At first, Sam Brinton denies that they did it. Then they call back and say, well, maybe I wasn't honest. I did take it, but the clothes inside were mine. Right. Which is,
apparently they found him. They were able to find him because he left behind his glass slipper.
Oh yeah, yes, of course. No,
And he was able, and they tried it on his foot.
I think, yes. Anyway, part of it was they looked at security footage and they looked at the bag being checked onto a flight back to Washington D.C. And then because this person looks rather unique, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to pull up the picture right now. But here's the part of the story where it gets even more interesting. And I'm not even sure you and I have talked about this. Sam Brinton has been charged again by doing the same thing in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Did you hear this? So,
yes.
This
apparently
is now,
there's a whole host of luggage thefts.
Well,
that he might be responsible.
Is that there was a woman named Kate Hyde who's on Twitter, and she tweeted out when this whole thing broke down that Sam Brinton's wardrobe is now much easier to understand if you just think that all of his clothes are other people's clothes that he found in their luggage, which I thought was a brilliant take then. And it looks like it's one of those situations in which the take is coming true, that is in fact accurate, that this person, they don't have any clothes of their own. They just wear other things that they find in other people's suitcases, which is,
but again, to be serious for a second.
Well, yes.
When a grown man shows up to work wearing a cocktail dress, a woman's cocktail dress, and this person is in charge of nuclear waste disposal, I think someone should have said, maybe not stable. But here's the thing, and it goes to our Festivus, right? Our airing of grievances. I am now beyond patience when it comes to they, them, he, she. What the left has done is change objective reality. They have bent reality to their political, religious view, and the rest of us are supposed to just go along. And again, just a news story. In Virginia, right here, nearby where you and I live, there was a church group that had made reservations at a restaurant weeks in advance, and a couple 3 hours before the Christmas party, they were going to have a dessert Christmas party at this restaurant. Because of the woke workers did not like that this church believed that men are men, women are women, that babies are precious, that marriage is one man, one woman for life. Because they believed these traditional Orthodox principles, their reservation was canceled.
Right. And again, canceled, by the way, right before the party happened.
Right.
But let's talk about that for a second, because right, if we're being consistent and intellectually consistent, I have no problem with, obviously I disagree with their beliefs. I disagree with the idea that they would be offended by this. But if we're going to go down this road of, that people have an art and cooking is an art in the same way that design websites. But you're
conflating two issues.
I don't think I am, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Web design is different than public accommodation. Again, this same restaurant. Here's the point: this same restaurant, if the local chapter of Panthers, Black Panthers, wanted to have their Christmas party, and this restaurant canceled the reservation, that would be illegal.
But this is my point, is in the end, the hypocrisy is certainly on the part of the left, because, on the one hand, we are seeing lawsuits. We have a case before the Supreme Court, yet another case before the Supreme Court, in which someone is being subjected to trying to change their, they're having their conscience violated, their right to conscience violated.
Well, it's a case of compelled speech.
Right.
So which is much different than the restaurant public accommodation.
Well, I'm sorry, say that again.
Compelled speech, the government forcing you to engage in speech with which you disagree, is different than the public accommodation laws that govern most. Most situations in restaurants.
I see this as I do see this as a compelled speech issue, right? I do see this as in the end, in the end,
how's it compelled speech if waiters and waitresses simply serve
okay, and I think that was a garbage excuse on the part of the restaurant, right? The restaurant should have just said, we don't want to serve these people because we do not agree with them and we do not want
but that's illegal,
etc.
But that's literally illegal.
No, but Jerry, but see, and I tend to have a
it shouldn't be illegal,
with that law. But
but you're still conflating, though.
I'm not, because in the end, the restaurant wanted to refuse service to these people, and because they didn't believe in what the people stood for. And I don't have a problem with that. I think the end,
but here's what I'm saying.
Yes,
the 303 creative Supreme Court case is not about public accommodation. It is literally about forcing an artist, a graphic designer, forcing her to engage in a design in speech that she disagrees.
Right, and in the end, I think it's
illegal.
the same.
That's illegal. That's a violation of the First Amendment.
I think that in the end, laws that direct somebody and require somebody to engage in a restaurant and serve somebody because of that someone else's beliefs, and that their beliefs conflict with somebody else's beliefs, I think that is wrong as well. It's all the same sort of issue.
The difference is, and why I say you're conflating is that one is, for the past 5 decades, is law, public accommodation law. This idea of compelling artists to engage in speech is completely different.
No, it isn't different. You said it's different, but you haven't explained to me how. Except,
but listen, let me be very clear. Clear, because in the 303 case, there is an artist,
right,
who is
how is a chef or a baker different than a graphic designer in terms of the art that they do?
Well, again, but even with the baker, it's not the baking. It is the cake design. This is different. What the 303 case?
I understand what the 303 case says, Jerry.
It would be illegal. That same baker in Colorado, if he refused to sell cupcakes to gay people, that would be illegal. That wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. The case is that they wanted him to design something. It wasn't about serving food. It was about artistic force, compelling of speech.
Sure.
In this restaurant case, there is serving these people food is not compelling them to engage in activities or speech.
This is my point. I think, and I agree with you on the issue of the servers having their feelings hurt is a very different situation than a graphic designer or a baker, pastry chef, what have you.
Sure.
But in the end, it was the restaurant owner, right? The restaurant owner should have just said, I don't want to serve these people based upon their beliefs. And that is illegal, Jerry, but again, it is all about compelling people to do things that act against their conscience. That's at the root of their sameness, right? It is in the end, if someone believes something that I disagree with,
I guess my point is this: is that you're taking this, what you're doing here, and I'm gonna needle you a little bit. You're pulling a Cato right now, because what you're doing is that you're drawing this back at a 30,000-foot level that's not applicable or practical to what we're talking about. Except that
it is, Jerry, insofar as it points out the hypocrisy of the left. The left, because remember, the left doesn't see any of these things as expressions of someone's talent. They see it all as a public accommodation issue. And so if we're going to draw these lines and talk about the issues of hypocrisy, we have to use the left's own logic against them in these cases. And for the left to say, well, the graphic designer in the 303, they need to serve all these people, and the cake baker needs to bake the cake. And because
I get it.
And I say this, Jerry, based upon the questions and the hypotheticals that were being pushed back by the leftist Supreme Court.
I understand, but here's where my head is at, and it comes back to the theme of the program. I'm tired of talking about theoretical arguments.
Right.
We have to fight in the trenches. And right now, the other side has established the boundaries and the terrain in which we fight.
Right.
And the terrain right now says that if an African American, if a Christian, if a transgendered person goes into a restaurant, it is illegal to refuse service.
Right.
That is the law of the land for half a century. We're not going to change that. That's not going to change today or 10 years from now. But here's the thing. But let me make my point. My point is that we can change and stop artists from being compelled to engage in speech with which they disagree. That we can win now. But when you conflate the two things, it becomes a theoretical argument.
No, it doesn't. It becomes a very real argument, because it becomes the example of, well, okay, you think that it's perfectly acceptable for a restaurant in Richmond to refuse service to Christians because of their beliefs. Then therefore you have to admit that it is perfectly acceptable for someone to not want to design a website, or for someone to not want to design and bake a cake. Except
one is compelled speech to engage in activity and religion with which you disagree, and the other is simple public accommodation of serving food. I don't think I get your 30,000 foot principle, that is, but in terms of the practicality, focusing on that hypocrisy just forces us to lose more battles. We should,
I think it goes the other way, because I think it ultimately it tends to get the other side to shut down. They don't shut. But give me an example ever when the left is shut down with a philosophical as a result of a philosophical argument. When? Well, never. That's why we lose. We're making philosophical arguments, and they're actually on the ground in the streets making practical arguments and beating the shit out of us. That's where the Supreme Court steps in there, and they say, listen, if you're going to go down this road,
the Supreme Court's already ruled on public accommodation. We're not going to change that.
And then they're going to go down and they're going to say that there is this right inherent in all of this to someone to be able to not serve based upon their conscience. That's what they're going to. This court will decide 303 the right way. We will have won that. Here's the bottom line on this. Right.
What the restaurant did in Virginia is illegal. Period. I don't want to argue hypocrisy and philosophy, and it's illegal. And the restaurant should be brought up on whatever citations or charges. What they did was illegal.
I think in the end, when we go down and we start making these carve-out exemptions for this, and we start drawing the line like that, Jerry,
carving out. It already exists.
Right? Remember the problem.
What are we carving out? It already exists.
Because
for 50 years.
What happens then is the left comes back at us and they say, well, why is it okay? Why is it illegal for the restaurant to shut down?
Because one is public accommodation, Jerry, and the other is compelled speech.
But that's just an arbitrary line.
No, it's not arbitrary. Forcing someone to, Andrew, if you must become a Methodist, otherwise you are going to be in violation of Virginia law. That is compelling you to do something against your conscience, forcing you to engage in a religious practice with which you disagree.
Right. That's not an arbitrary.
Going into a deli,
line.
And being refused service. I want a pastrami. I'm not going to serve you a pastrami because I don't like the cross around your neck. These are two different things. This is a perfect example of why Festivus is important for the show, because we're arguing about something. And what we ought to be doing is making the case as to why compelled speech is wrong, and also why public accommodation law is the law of the land. This is like people who want to argue against Medicare. It's over. Medicare exists. It's not going away.
Okay.
You want to argue against public accommodation laws? It's not going anywhere.
But Jerry,
so
it's not that I want to argue about public accommodation laws. What I'm saying is that it gives the left an avenue to start moving the goalposts. And they're saying, okay, well, if I am required to serve this person in this way, then there's the next step and the next step. And all of a sudden, the only line is within the First Amendment is you can't compel somebody to change their religion, or you can't compel somebody to, you can't sit there and compel somebody to.
Listen, here's a better way that these two things would be connected, and that is if this group, this religious group going to this restaurant, if they were going to proselytize on restaurant property, the restaurant would be in its right to deny service. Sure. That's not what they were doing. They were going to have a Christmas celebration and eat pie.
Sure.
It has this has nothing to do with, in any way, shape, or form, the compelled speech.
Not that I want to go down the road of rights interaction and how the law should draw the line, right? But gets back into this issue of the ad hoc test, which is, you have your right to do X, I have my right to do Y. When those rights come into conflict, the party that is more aggrieved is the way the law is supposed to lay down on.
On a theoretical level, on a political principled level, I don't agree with public accommodation laws. I think that I should be able to, if I own a restaurant, right, I should be able to refuse service for any reason. I think that, but it's not changing. So why are we focused on here? Here's the bottom line. Here, I'm focused. What the restaurant did was illegal.
Because I like an opportunity to point out the hypocrisy of the left. I don't like the idea of when the left can point out hypocrisy on the right. Go ahead.
Well, I no longer care about pointing out hypocrisies because I don't even think they exist anymore. It's not about hypocrisy. The left doesn't believe in same standards. It's hierarchy.
Well, now this gets into what you were talking about on the radio the other day, which is, politicians who say both things out of their mouth at the same time.
But the thing is that I think as a movement, I said this to you the other day off mic. We have to start emulating and doing what the left does. We are getting rolled. We are losing. Andrew,
right. And part of what the left does is they
battle
we've hypocrisy lost. On the right. That's part of what the left does is they point out when the right is being hypocritical, and they're very good at it. Now, part of the problem is, of course, is that they control the narrative, and so they are better at doing it. I just, it's a matter of pushing back in those circumstances.
But how you would push back here is this restaurant should be cited, should be fined, period. You want to refuse service because people are Christian. Well, then we're gonna fuck you. Part of my language.
And by the way, there's no reason why we can't. Why Jerry can't
foot of the state on your neck.
Right. Something that's interesting, Gary, because it gets down to what you and I were talking about in terms of the election.
Part of my language, by the way.
That's all right. And what you and I were talking about in terms of the Georgia runoff and the issues of the blame game. And everybody wants to have their particular position on it, that it's Donald Trump's fault, or that it's Romney McDaniel's fault, or that it's Mitch McConnell's fault, or that it's Walker's fault.
Yes.
And in the end, all of these things can be true, but we get wrapped around all of us having our own particular answer to this, and our answer is the right answer, and it's the only answer.
But I just think this. I'm tired of losing all the time. We're talking about philosophy and rights, and meanwhile we're getting rolled everywhere. We're being driven from the public square.
But and in the end, again, to sort of put the further pin in this, we all can be saying these things, as long as we're all moving towards the same goal.
But we're not, but we're not, though. The right is not on the same page. We're all over the place. And the left is on the same page.
That we should, and my point is, and I'm agreeing with you on this, is that we should be, and we have to be more on this.
But this program, our exchange for the last 10 minutes shows how we're not. You want to talk about the political principle about being able to refuse service, and I'm saying that what we ought to be worried about is compelled speech, and that the Supreme Court case in terms of 303 Creative, this is an artist being compelled to engage in a religiosity with which he disagrees. That's the principle we should be focused on,
right? And all I'm saying is
not whether or not this restaurant was right in theory.
But Jerry,
to refuse service.
But you keep hammering on the public accommodation law argument, and all I'm saying is that in the end, the left, all we need to do is point out to the left, you agree with us. You agree with us that people should be able to refuse service to people.
Except
Hold on. Let me finish my point.
But you're conflating the issues again.
But
this
no,
is not about
Jerry,
service. It's about
okay,
it's about speech.
Okay,
it's different.
Jerry, you are the one who keeps saying that I'm conflating the issues and raising it. All I'm saying is that this is an opportunity in which the left is doing what we say that they should be able to do, and so we declare victory on that issue. When we say, okay, fine, then as long as if you agree that people can kick people out of restaurants because you don't like their religion, then fine, then all bets are off. And nobody can, people can go ahead and not bake a cake for a wedding.
I agree. We have to move on, again, refusing someone's service in a restaurant is not the same thing as forcing a baker to design a cake
my point is that you use it as an example and you declare victory and you move forward. The point is you don't want to declare victory on this and move forward. You want to turn around
because I think that the restaurant likely, again, this is where your argument breaks down, because in theory the restaurant should be able to say no, but the law is they can't say no.
Okay, but in the end, right, setting aside what actually happens to the restaurant in terms of Virginia public accommodation law, as this issue is in the media, all you do is you turn around to our brethren on the left, enemies on the left, whatever you want to call them. You say, okay, you think this restaurant did the right thing by refusing service to this Christian group? Okay, then let's move on. People can refuse service. We'll agree with you. So let's go ahead and let's move forward. And you guys don't challenge anybody on our side who wants to refuse to act against, their own conscience in terms of
I do think what we're doing there though is we are surrendering something that's not true, and that is the best example is the Colorado baker.
Yes,
the Colorado baker did not refuse service. He would have served cakes, provided for the wedding, the gay wedding. What he didn't want to do was have to design a cake.
And the same,
he didn't refuse service.
The same thing.
It's
in
different.
The same thing in the 303 case.
But my point is, but it's different. These are two different things.
But okay,
they're just two different animals.
I think it's a distinction without a difference in the end. And my point is that you use it as a cudgel against the other side to say, okay, you're willing to go down this road, so then here's what we're going to do is this is the new standard that's out there. Now you're right in terms of the fact that the media will never let that happen.
Yeah.
But that's
a good point.
As long as we keep saying that they're different, then we can't declare victory and move forward. Speaking of which, in terms of sort of conflating things and distinctions without a difference, this issue of Britney Griner, which is this crazy story. Anyway, Britney Griner, for those of you who don't know, was a WNBA basketball player. What
she was? Back, she still plays, right?
I guess so. Yeah. Presumably she'll still play.
Hey, the good news here is I know the name of one WNBA player now.
Yes. So she whatever reason decided she was going to go play as Russia is gearing up to start their war against Ukraine, and international tensions are high, and the U.S. is pushing back strongly, I guess as strong as the Biden administration can. She decides she's going to go play, women's basketball in Russia, and for whatever reason decides that it's going to be okay to take her vape pen with, hash oil in it. She gets arrested at the airport in Moscow. And again, because tensions are so high, she is thrown in the clink in Russia and has been there since February. So
you know what? I got to say, I know you're in the middle of this. I got my brain's still on the other thing. I got just one last question for you. We'll talk about the WNBA. I apologize. Let's say, again, because the left is smarter than us, the left says, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This restaurant should have served these Christians, just like the 303 artist, the tech expert, and the artist bakery. They should have served these gay weddings.
This
then
is
we
my-
lose the argument.
But this is essentially right. They're not going to agree with us on that. That's in the end, the one thing they will not agree with us on. They will be the ones drawing the distinction, Jerry. And
do you understand still
line.
that but again, this is like the attorney who asks the witness on the stand a question that the attorney is not prepared in terms of the answer.
Yes.
Like what if they agree with us?
They're not going to. But that's just it,
okay,
Jerry. They're not. That's the point in the end, is that they will always draw the distinction as to why they're morally. Again,
I understand,
hold on, Jerry. Let me make these, because this is.
But you're giving up a principle here. You're saying that these two things are the same, and I'm saying they're not the same.
Well, you did say. Hold on for a second. You did say that they're the same, except that one is now a matter of law, and we don't want to lose that matter of law. You said if in a perfect world, we would not have to have the public accommodation.
Right, but refusing to serve the general public is different than being compelled to engage in a religious activity. These are two different things. And I'm saying that, take your argument.
But Jerry, okay, well, first of all, stop for a second, because remember, part of the problem, of course, is that for the left, their political belief system is a religion, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, right.
So there is that aspect of it. But the point in the end is they will not go down the road of saying that this is the same thing in the same way that we will, because they are offering up their philosophy from a position of moral superiority.
Right, but you're still running the risk. Again, theoretically, if this was a debate, a high school debate, you're running the risk of the other side conceding your point. And then you're forced to then concede theirs, which is the baker doesn't have to serve
and vice versa, Jerry. This gets, in the end, it is far more likely that they will say, well, you're saying that X is okay, therefore what you're doing is okay, and you're drawing this line. It is more likely that they will say that if you have to serve people in the restaurant, then you have to design the wedding program and the wedding website, and you have to design the cake, than it is for them to turn around and say, yeah, you agree with the libertarian position, which is the smaller libertarian position, ultimately, which is that you can refuse service, you can refuse to wait on somebody whose political beliefs you don't agree with. Right, because remember, Jerry, these are the people who believe that you can go and harass somebody in a restaurant.
I guess
somebody at their home. Hold on. People who are routinely going to violate all aspects of it, right? They will say that it is perfectly okay for a mall to refuse service to people who are proselytizing, and or leafleting on conservative issues, but they need to give access to union people to expound on their views or whatever lefty philosophy they have that they want to advocate for, because they're the ones who ultimately are hypocrites, and they're driven by their religion, as opposed to us who can approach these things from a more consistent.
I guess the bottom line for me is that it's apples and oranges. One is, again, compelling someone to engage in an activity with which they wholeheartedly
and for me the bottom
disagree, and the other is not serving pie.
For me, the bottom line is that I am someone who wants people to be. I don't see the distinction, and I do believe that I want people to be consistent in their beliefs and how they project those beliefs. X and Y and Z, it is consistent. These are things that apply.
But again, I'm just saying that
we were now
forcing someone.
The axle.
I know, but the thing is that refusing someone service at a restaurant is not in any way the same thing as forcing an artist to design something with which they disagree. It's two different issues.
Ultimately, as I've said now, the left is going to turn around and call that hypocritical, and it is far more likely that they're going to go down the road of again extending the public accommodation issue to these other aspects, these other areas, as they are doing. Right. This is in the end, Jerry, what underlies laws like the Colorado law that is being challenged is it is the extension of the public accommodation law to compel this kind of speech. And so, when we turn around and we have examples of the left, the left engaging in this, in essentially actions of conscience, then we have to point out the hypocrisy on that side. Okay. Can we stick a pin in this now? Can we stick our Festivus stainless steel pole in this now?
Yes.
And move forward and talk about Britney Griner.
Yes.
It's an area where I think you and I are in much greater agreement on this.
Yes.
Jerry's disappointed.
I am. I ought to just move to Ireland and open a pub, because we're not going to win anything. We've lost everything. We've lost the language. There are people who think it's morally superior to bend to the mental health or the mental health sickness of those who say they, them, or men who think they're women. We've lost that. We've redefined marriage.
Or more to the point, an administration that trades. I mean, this is the insanity.
Oh, yeah, and this is
this is the
insanity.
We
trade
a convicted arms dealer who was convicted of conspiracy to kill Americans and supporting terrorists. We trade that person for a women's basketball player.
Right. Now, don't get me wrong. I think this basketball player should not have received a sentence of 9 years hard labor. But the fact of the matter is that what the administration did was, again, the signal to every rogue state: arrest an American, and you'll be able to leverage it to get a terrorist, a criminal, out of jail.
And apparently it's unfair to say, hey, if you're going to be an idiot and go and play basketball in Russia while Russia is preparing to invade another country, maybe, just maybe, you should leave your hash oil vape pen at home. I mean, it's just, to me, it's like, it really is the idea of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. We it's tragic that this young woman was going to spend, however many years in a Russian prison. But it's like the old adage: if you didn't want to go to Chicago, why'd you get on this train?
Yeah.
And the idea that America as a nation, I mean, I'm gonna pull it back again. Maybe this is me just being too philosophical. America as a nation suffers because of this, because this guy, Victor Bout, and I had someone ping me yesterday. In fact, I'll say it out loud. A listener, Marty, pinged me yesterday about this, and he's like, "Well, do you think he's been turned by U.S. intelligence?" Well, U.S. intelligence may think that they've turned him, but there's no guarantee of that. I think it's highly doubtful. I think this is just the fecklessness of the administration in giving up somebody. This is what Russia wanted. They weren't going to deal. The Biden administration was desperate to get Britney Griner home. They wanted some good news about Christmas time. So they traded this guy who was in all likelihood going to go back to, in some way, shape, or form, dealing in arms on behalf of Russia. And let's be really clear about this. Victor Bout has, I mean, it's so funny because we talk about, Gazprom and Hunter Biden, and we talk about the folks who were sort of dealing with Chris Steele. Anybody who is making money in Russia and dealing with things on the world stage has ties to the Russian government and therefore Russian intelligence, because the two are the same thing. And so essentially we've given a Russian governmental asset back to Russia who can turn around and harm people.
Yeah. And the irony is that the Biden administration is concerned about the national security aspect of this. And White House spokesperson was asked that question yesterday. Why did you give him up if he's a national security threat?
Yeah.
And again, there's no good answer to that. Here's the thing also, and I think it's important to say, and that is in the context of how we've turned our culture upside down. This basketball player checks all the boxes for the left. She's queer. She is an anti-American celebrity. She's a female. She's a darling of the left, especially the Hollywood celebrity left. And so the Biden administration gets celebrated by all the right people for doing this. And these are people who really don't care about American security or the safety of American citizens. Again, even this woman, right? Her fame, her claim to fame prior to this was she was one of the first WNBA ball players who would not stand for the national anthem.
Yeah.
Yes. And the second thing is that it also goes to show how unrealistic or how divorced the left is from reality. This woman thought that because she was African American, because she's queer, because she's a woman, that she could do what she wanted.
Right.
Because in America, she would have been right. Even if she broke the law, there would have been some outcry, and she would have been given, a slap on the wrist but the point is, the left has this sense of hierarchy that I mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
Agreed. And this lack of self-examination. And so therefore the rules don't apply. And she went to Russia and reality slapped her in the face. The rules do apply.
Yes. And
now again, 9 years hard labor is ridiculous, but she still broke the law.
Yes, and yes, and it was, it's her right, and all of this examination. Well, she only went because WNBA players are paid far less than men's NBA. All of that aside, in the end, she made the decision to go. She made the decision to bring her vape pen with her, and you're absolutely correct, Jerry, in this issue of, and it gets down to this idea again, another core principle that we've lost. Again, in the airing of grievances, is words have meaning. So, you have the left parroting all kinds of platitudes. America is an evil nation. America is a racist nation. America is this. The Donald Trump was soft on Russia. We now have adults. The adults are in the room in terms of flexing American power abroad. And they don't understand that what they're saying actually has an impact, that outside of this country, it makes America not only get viewed as weak, but at a time in which our enemies, and we have enemies as a nation, are much, much stronger. And so Britney Griner then goes and gets confronted. Phrase I used to use on the old show, the most well-intentioned policies eventually bump up against very real realities, or as my father says, there are many roads to utopia. All, however, must traverse the surface of the earth, right? Reality is going to intrude on you. And so, you can talk about these things and say that Donald Trump, it was not being strong on Russia, and that he was Putin's puppet. And yet here we are, an American goes overseas, an American gets arrested, and the only thing that the Biden administration can do is trade a convicted Russian arms dealer who was convicted of conspiring to kill Americans to get a basketball player back.
Right. Now, and again, let's not undervalue. She's an American, even if we disagree with her politics. She's a human person. This punishment did not fit the crime. It was an abuse of power.
But time out for a second, Jerry.
But that could be true at the same time. The administration, the Biden administration, made a very serious mistake trading this dangerous national security threat for the WNBA celebrity.
And I want to, but this is what we talk about this issue of the left's, the fatal conceit of the left, the arrogance of the left, right? Because, and you're absolutely correct. Britney Griner approached this situation as though that her Americanness and
entitled
prevailing, this entitled her to be treated in this way abroad.
Right.
Whereas the reality is Russia is a very different place, and I will say it's very similar in some ways to the delusions of Dennis Rodman in going over to North Korea, insofar as Dennis Rodman, he thinks that what he would see in North Korea was the reality. Did you ever see the documentary? Sorry, we got a phone call in the background. I apologize. You ever see the documentary about the NBA players who went over with Dennis Rodman in North Korea to play an exhibition game? I don't remember what it was. I could go look it up while you're talking. But the point is that these players were invited. They didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. And then as they were in North Korea, the reality of what they were doing started to creep in, and they all got very uncomfortable with the situation that we're in. I'll tell you something. It is somewhat akin to, in retrospect, and I say this because right now is the anniversary of it. In 2010, I went to Algeria and I visited these refugee camps, the Sahrawi refugee camps. And it was a fascinating trip, and I'm glad I went in the end. But there was a lot that I didn't consider going into this trip and agreeing to go on this trip. From the implications, actually, I won't get into the sort of the national security implications of it, but the safety implications, right? It was 6 months later that Americans started getting kidnapped in these refugee camps by Al Qaeda in the Maghreb. And, you think about these things, but you don't when you sort of you're in there. And so Britney Griner goes, or the left starts talking about these things, and you think about the harsh sentence. But in the reality, if you know anything about what's going on the ground in Russia, you know that the Russians don't they don't have legalized drugs there. The drug of choice in Russia is vodka. They don't play around when it comes to breaking the law. They don't play around when it comes to Americans breaking the law, or foreigners generally, but Americans specifically. And so this idea that sort of you can go over, it was so foolhardy. Again, not that she necessarily, should have gotten 9 years, but that's what they do in Russia.
But she was conditioned. She was conditioned to feel entitled.
Yes.
She said it was a mistake. She did not mean to bring this vape with the cannabis oil, but the fact of the matter is that it was her hubris. The rules don't apply to her here in America, so therefore she didn't have the good sense to make sure that everything was kosher, so to speak, in her bags. Right. This is but this goes to the broader cultural decay issue here in America, that there are certain privileged class. There's a us and a them. There is the privileged, there are the elites and how they live and how they're held accountable or not held accountable. And there's the rest of us who can't eat at restaurants, and we get yelled and screamed at in the public square. We get canceled on Twitter. We even if we're fact-based about gender or about sexual ethics, it makes no difference. You can still lose your job. We live in two worlds. And I guess that's why I was so not upset, but so animated when it came to the other issue, is because it's getting to a point. You have children. I have 5 kids. Yes. So you're laughing at me. The fact of the matter is that
you're coming back to this topic.
Because we're handing our children a world in which they're going to have to be hidden. Look, Jonathan Turley today has an excellent piece up at his blog.
Yeah.
Better than 60% of college students are terrified to speak on college campuses. That's the world we're giving our kids. We're giving the world a place where free speech, freedom of association, religious liberty, the right to defend yourself, these rock solid principles that, again, up until 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago, we would never thought that these things would be questioned.
And this is why I pull it back, Jerry, to that 30,000 foot level. And while we can talk about sort of crime and specifics and those things, we have to pull it back to things like objective truth and respect for the rule.
Well, I agree. I know. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. The issue of the fact that we no longer have a common heritage in America, right?
We do, except the left denies it. The left revises.
We have a common heritage, except that common heritage, the left is trying to do what they can to cleave us. But I just want to come back to this, just because I want to stick a pin in it. I don't want to dance on the grave of Otto Warmbier, who was the kid who went to North Korea and was arrested and essentially killed in custody there. Or no, I guess he was hurt and
he was brought
brain
home
damage.
in a
and he died
terrible
brain
state.
damage. Yes.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's like he went to North Korea. He shouldn't have gone to North Korea, and he tried stealing a poster off of a wall, thinking that was going to be nothing. And it's just it's this issue of the world is a dangerous place, and wishing that away is not going to help anybody. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Tim Carney, writer, editor over at the Washington Examiner, he's a scholar over at AEI, tweeted yesterday, should Americans not travel to Russia? Question mark. This
certainly not right now.
No, my point is that, maybe there are parts of the world that Americans should stay away from. Even if you believe you have the right to go and you want to see maybe we should, take a step back and understand the world.
I'll give you a really good example of this. It would be fascinating to go to North Korea. I'd be fascinated to go to North Korea and see Pyongyang and see all sorts of sites. But no, and this is the difference between 51-year-old me and 39-year-old me. 39-year-old me, if I'd been invited to go to North Korea,
there's a certain kind of hubris there too, in that, we know what Iran is. We know the regime is evil. We know just recently they executed one or several of the protesters. We know that Russia is this criminal state. We know that North Korea might be outside of Nazi Germany, the worst, most violent state government in the history of mankind. We know these things. Why go as if the people who live there is like they're zoo animals?
Yes.
Let's go and see Tehran. Well, why? Why would you want to go? And again, years ago, when people would travel to Havana, why do you want to go and kind of flout your freedom when there are people there suffering? Yes. Right? People in North Korea are suffering and dying and being tortured.
So I went to Russia in 1989, right? And it was before the fall of communism. Now, it was in the midst of glasnost and perestroika. I was fascinated by the Soviet Union. It happened to be a graduation trip. I went with my mom and my grandmother. And obviously, again, you can call this the hubris, right? Didn't think about the fact that I was going to sort of watch this and sort of like a trip to the zoo. And I think that's a very apt description of this. But I wanted to see for myself what it was like there. And I wanted to meet the people. And I wanted to, have a better understanding of what the reality of the situation was. And for some people, there is that. And for some people, it is the concept of, there are folks who are war tourists. And they go, I interviewed Heather Lauer a couple of weeks back. She's the head of People United for Privacy. And she does a lot of this sort of travel to places that are otherwise marginal. Why? You have the stories of the folks who want to go. There are those indigenous tribes who live on isolated islands or isolated parts of the Amazon rainforest who, literally will attack you if you try to go and look for them. And for some folks, they want to go and they want to see for themselves. I'll tell you one place where I want to go real quick, Jerry. One place I want to go. Are you familiar with Pitcairn's Island?
No.
All right. So when you've heard of remember the movie The Bounty or Mutiny on the Bounty?
Sure.
It's a true story.
Yes.
And when the mutineers left Tahiti, they sailed, I believe it was west. I think it was west, and they landed at an island called Pitcairn's Island, and it's this isolated little hunk of rock in the South Pacific. I want to go to Pitcairn's Island. It has 50 inhabitants. Not that I'm ever going to go, but I think it would be interesting to go and see. By the way, all of the inhabitants are descended from the original mutineers and the people from Tahiti who went with them.
Excellent.
I'd like to go to Ireland first. All right,
I'd go to Ireland too.
People who would go, travel tourists who would go and visit Northern Ireland, at the height of the Troubles.
But again, I think that there is a there is an incredible disrespect for the people who are actually going through the troubles.
Right.
I just think that there's a hubris, there's a kind of ugliness to it.
Well, I mean, this gets into the context.
Hey, let's go tour the prisons in ancient Rome where Christians were being disemboweled. I'm very interested. I want to see this.
Okay, but
I want to see this
second,
Christian be disemboweled.
But time out for
Let's
a second.
Let's go check out a crucifixion.
But time out.
Let's go check out a crucifixion.
Oh, I see. You're putting it back in those times because right.
In my mind, going to Cuba, going to North Korea.
Hold on. It's the difference between going and visiting Auschwitz now or visiting Auschwitz in 1943.
Yes,
that's
you
the
visit
point
now because you don't ever want to forget
Agreed.
humankind.
I think
you want that footprint that on your heart, so to speak, or you want it to be imprinted. So we're so outraged. That outrage should continue.
Yes.
Which is why, again, every time I hear the left use the term denier, I think they should be called out. Because of there is an ugly history of Holocaust deniers. The left knows this, and then then if you disagree with them on climate change, you're a climate denier. Sure. Or if you disagree with them on any number of issues, you're a science denier. You are an election denier. And again, it betrays really the ugly heart at the center of leftism.
It is like a pending gate to the end of a scandal. You are bridge gate.
Except in Watergate, no one died. The Holocaust, 6 million Jews, 12 million people were systematically murdered.
But the point is, in the end, it's the same kind of a thing. It's a way of shortchanging the thinking, right, and trying to assign something to a particular situation.
In the spirit of Festivus and the airing of grievances, what do you make of again? The left corporations continue to sexualize and groom our kids. American Doll Company is now putting out a book for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds about how they can have their genitals cut off and how they can identify if you're a boy as a girl and a girl as a boy.
The American Girl doll, or is this somebody else?
Yes. American Girl doll.
So the next American Girl doll is going to be transgender.
Well, no. There's a book that they put out, and this book in years past.
Jerry, I put it in the same category of the latest Project Veritas videos, right? Which is, they go to this private school principal who was openly bragging about showing sex toys to kids and offering up thoughts about that, and offering up thoughts about
why are we doing this? Why is the left? And this is mainstream. It's not just the hard left, the progressive movement. Mainstream culture, corporations and school teachers and school systems, whole city governments with celebrations of trans this and trans that. Why are we sexualizing our kids?
Right. It gets down to the issue of what this is the theme, which is the concept that words matter. And that in the end, the left can say what they want about something not mattering, but in the end, it does, right? The left goes to great pains to say, well, none of this has an impact on kids. The drag bingo doesn't have impact on kids, or materials in libraries. Well, they don't have an impact on kids, and you're a book burner if you want. Again, right. Making the Nazi comparison to all of these things. It gets down to remember what you've talked about in the past, which is the issue of a lot of this agenda has to do with the normalization of, lowering the age of consent.
Yeah. That's the crux of the issue. Yeah. I had a very frank conversation yesterday with someone who asked me the question, why are so many in our culture, from governments to school boards to school systems to corporations to and to the rest of it, why are they desensitizing our children to sex and gender issues?
See, it's interesting. You say the word desensitize, whereas I think it goes the other way, which is they are trying to they're trying to go down the road of putting these thoughts in these kids.
Well, no, I agree. So they're desensitizing them to the idea of adults having these conversations. Here, I'm going to say it, and I'll get in trouble. Hopefully I won't get in trouble. But I think there are too many people who want to have sex with kids, and that's why they're doing it. That's the bottom line. The whole normalization of the trans issue, the trans agenda, is literally to sexualize kids. That's what they're doing, and we should recognize it.
Let me ask you this: books that you read when you were a kid, and I'm not talking about the great books. I'm not talking about
like Mutiny on the Bounty.
What was that?
Mutiny on the Bounty.
Mutiny on the Bounty, yes, which was a movie.
It's one of my favorite books, by the way. I read it over and over again. I loved it.
Did you? The Mutiny on the Bounty.
Oh, I loved it.
Okay, interesting. But my point is, books that you read when you were in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Right. Stuff that stuck with you over the years. I'm going to say, like, I don't know if you read any of the Judy Blume books when you were growing up. It's funny because I say this. I had another thought that will come back to me of something that I think was something from my childhood that wouldn't. Oh yeah, and I know what it was. I'll get to you in a second. But I think about how books that I read at that age, how they shaped me and offered an impression on me and things that I think about and believe today. It's funny, because I want to do the interview. It's a good segue into this. Did you ever hear the album when you were a kid, "Free to Be You and Me"?
No.
Okay. Okay. I could have predicted this. "Free to Be You and Me" was an album. It was put out by Marlo Thomas in 1972. Marlo Thomas, daughter of Danny Thomas, on that girl. It's Marlo Thomas and Mel Brooks and Harry Belafonte. The song "It's All Right to Cry" by Rosie Greer was in it. Alan Alda is in it. And I'm going to say, the probably the children of lefty parents in a number of environments, not just in New York City, this was an enormously popular album. And again, it's something that sort of shaped me moving forward. I can point to things like the song "Free to Be You and Me" by the New Seekers as something that has stuck with me. Anyway.
I do think this, at the risk of
hold on. Janice is trying to be really quiet walking down the stairs here because she's going out to do Secret Santa shopping. So, honey, have a good trip. Enjoy your party. Love you too.
The whole attack here and the over sexualization, the trans confusion, gender confusion, mainstream involvement here. I do think it has to do with age of consent laws, and unfortunately normalizing sex with children. But I also think, broadly speaking, it's an attack on the family. Remember,
I agree with that.
Freedom, liberty, the basic unit of liberty is the family. And so in this country, in our culture, in Western
basic unit of society is the family. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But also, but liberty can't exist without the family, little platoons, the private organizations. It's the backbone of any free culture. But you're right. Of a society, the family is the first unit. And look what the left has done. Right. We've allowed for divorce for no reason. We've diminished marriage. We have redefined marriage. We've divorced marriage from the idea of having children and reproducing. We have created a circumstance where there is no family. So what takes its place? The state, wraparound services, etc.
So let me ask you this, because this is the thing that I thinking about the fact that it is the 50th anniversary of "Free to Be You and Me," which boils down to this idea of, I am who I am, you are who you are, you're free to do things, I'm free to do things anyway, you and me are free to be you and me. And you think about the way you and I were raised and how we saw the culture changing and mores changed. And you think about, there's a point to what I'm doing here, Jerry. You think about the way that society has changed in the last 50 years, the erosion of the family, the erosion of respect for law, the collapse of, and this really gets into what you wanted to talk about today, which is, when Jerry presented the thesis of the show today, he was talking yesterday about the fact that we are 1 to 2 election cycles from losing the republic.
Yeah, we are.
I want you to look further down the road. You think about the last 50 years and where we are from where we were 50 years ago today, Jerry. Where are we 50 years from now? What is, right now we're talking about whereas we were, literally Free to Be You and Me was talking about things like women can be doctors, men can do these things, women can do these things as well. Very controversial things like, parents are people with children, mommies are people with children. Now the concept of what a mother is gone by the wayside. What a father is gone by the wayside. Where are we in 50 years?
I mean, I mean, we're in a dystopian state.
Yeah,
we're in a place where, because of government mismanagement, printing of money, deficits, and debt, where we're going to have economic stagflation. We're going to have the state providing more of everything, from food and housing and transportation. We're moving towards this kind of like Hollywood dystopian state, and I say that I say that and I'm frightened by it. Because I believe it's true. I think again, just look what's happening in where you have governments coming in, state governments now, where they're prohibiting the use of natural gas to heat homes. At least a dozen states are tied to California's ban on gasoline, new cars with gasoline engines being sold after the year 2035. Every public school system around the country is providing pre-K meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, aftercare, physician services, psychological services. I mean, you're seeing the state come in a way that's really unprecedented in human history.
You don't think
so that's where we're heading.
You don't think that there is a moment, right? Because you go on this path. Our economy is about 22, 23 trillion dollars in size. And so
our national debt is 31 trillion.
Yeah.
And if you add on top of that personal debt, right? America's total debt, including government debt and personal debt, is about 65 trillion dollars. Think about that.
But my point is, you think about where things have come in the last 50 years and you combine those things together, you don't think that there is some kind of a reactionary point, right? I mean, there is the point in which the Constitution no longer has meaning, and
we're almost there. We're a decade away from that.
So, well, I mean, but let me add to this. So the Constitution no longer has meaning, and I think we're there, right? Where you have folks who are saying that the Constitution is an evil document because it was written by, white slaveholding middle-aged men. So you have that lack of respect there, and the institutions therein. You have the growing power of the executive branch. You have a gelded Congress, politicians who aren't willing to take the steps, or when they do try to take the steps to rein in the power of the executive branch, either they're attacked in the media, right? And where the whole idea behind a revolutionary impulse is being stifled by the left. Anyway, my point is, I don't think you're wrong in terms of the dystopia. I'm wondering where the revolutionary point comes and what happens there, right? If America can no longer, let's take it, America can no longer have a budget, like the federal government can no longer have a budget because so much of it is going to go to serve the debt. The economy
what'll happen is we're going to default on the debt, Andrew, right? And it's going to create a worldwide economic depression. That's where, and again, we don't have to go that route. We can still fix it, but the fact is that there's no one willing to do so.
But my point is, as we dumb down America, as you talked about in last week's show, deify youth, and we give more power to young people who don't know, because you cursed earlier, I'm going to curse from Shinola. And they have no respect for those institutions that are of vital importance. The things that could have saved us from going on, right? They packed the courts, and we no longer have the Supreme Court to rely on. All right, Jerry. So in 50 years, is there a United States of America, or are we somehow subordinated to China in all ways, except for the name only?
Look. We know this, right? We know that in the history of humankind, no democracy has survived. Every democracy has devolved into tyranny. That's the truth. Every democracy everywhere in human history. America has been able to survive. Again, the longest democracy in world history is the very young United States.
Yeah.
Right. That's very telling. But the reason why our democracy has lasted is because it's a representative democracy. It's a republic, and property rights. The idea of rights come from God, not from the state. Protections against majority tyranny.
Yes.
The Electoral College. My point that independent judiciary. These things have allowed us to thrive. It's only really in the last decade,
50.
Since the Obama administration, where there's been an acceleration to delegitimize, and we see this all the time.
But my point is that it has accelerated in the last decade, but I think the seeds were being sown 50
of course.
years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yes. But it has accelerated recently, right? Look, 1977, Jimmy Carter infamously had the Council on the Family, where they literally redefined what a family is.
Yes.
And people then were saying, this will equal. We're going to run to a place where families are destroyed. Look, the Roe v. Wade decision has created a culture where we devalue life. The sanctity of life is no longer existing. We don't value science or medicine any longer.
The war on poverty and creating the cycle of dependence.
Right.
All of these.
So to answer your question. Just again to be I don't know, esoteric about this in terms of, if you're a person of faith, this is exactly what the scriptures say how history will wind down. Every Orthodox Christian tradition believes that the world will devolve into this kind of one worldism, global government, where you're going to have the state, right? You're going to have the spirit of the Antichrist really is, in my mind, the spirit of the Antichrist is the state coming in and providing for you and helping you. So again, as a Christian, I think we're devolving into exactly as history is playing out. And again, this is why, to be honest with you, my solace, what allows me to get up in the morning and not literally go insane, is the fact that as a Christian, I don't live in the world's economy. I don't live I'm not subject to what's happening, because I have a God who loves me, who will protect me. That's my only solace. So what I think where we're heading is similar to first century Rome, where you're going to have debauchery and libertinism and tyranny all around us, but there's going to be remnants and communities of faith where people protect and care for each other. Remember, the early church didn't proselytize the way the current church does.
Yeah.
The reason why the church grew in the first century was because outsiders realized, well, look at this. They love their children. They take care of their elderly. They're sick or cared for. I'm curious about this sect, and that's how the church grew. I'm going to say this real quick. I told this to my sister, and I know I'm filibustering here, but
you're fine.
You know, there in the Roman world, there were no sexual norms. You'd go to a rich Roman, their home, their villa. You would be offered a boy, a girl, a man, a woman for your pleasure.
Yeah.
Emperors, Caesars had palaces outside of Rome, where little children were delivered to them for molestation and for sexual pleasure. The idea of same-sex attraction, this was a normal thing. It was the church, it was Judaism, and then later, the Christianity that said, "Whoa, wait a second. Culture doesn't have to be this way. God has a better way for you." And then so the Christian became the counterculture. And what bothers me is that you have people who say things like, well, this idea of sexual purity, this is because the church doesn't understand this. Or no, the church has always been contrarian to these things. Culture is reverting back to what it was 2,000 years ago. That's where where the rich and the elites have what they need and want, and the poor are
damn
leveraged.
Everybody else.
Yeah, that's where we're heading, and that's what we'll be in 50 years.
We saw a preview. By the way, we saw the Fabelmans, on which is the new Steven Spielberg movie. It's essentially an autobiography. Good movie. We enjoyed it. But there was a preview for a movie about, and it's based on a true story, sort of about a church, I think in Southern California in the late 60s, early 70s, and about sort of pivoting to be able to evangelize towards young people, sort of bringing in the hippie culture.
Well, the Jesus movement started in the 60s in California, the whole big hippie movement. This
is a movie about that. And so I'm very intrigued by this.
My mom and dad have friends from church, their age, who came to faith through the Jesus movement. Yeah, they were hippies who became Jesus hippies. But look, I mean, this is kind of a heavy thing, but the bottom line is that that's why I'm involved in ideas, because what is the quote? I'll paraphrase it. I'll live my life as if Christ comes back tomorrow, but prepare to live as if Christ won't come back for 100 years. Yeah. So I'm in 100-year mode where I want to sit and fight. But however, but do me a favor, pull up that article.
Oh yeah. Let me do that.
This is unfortunately, I think, a good representation in terms of where we are politically, culturally, in terms of questions we should be asking.
Yeah. So I had the whole license. Do I need to read this because you can't read this?
Yeah, I apologize. My contacts won't allow me to do
it. This is from someone. It's a letter to the editor. I don't know what it was, what newspaper it was in, but it was written by someone named Bart Anderson in Bullhead City. I mean, you want me to read the whole thing? It's a long letter, Jerry.
Well, start it and we can stop it. I mean,
editor, where am I? Have I entered the twilight zone? Why has January 6th been defined as an armed insurrection? Were people well armed? Were multiple people killed? Why is January 6th compared to Pearl Harbor, the Civil War, and 9/11? Why are about 150 people sitting in a DC jail being denied a speedy and public trial? Why are the debunked Russian collusion narratives in the headlines for more than 5 years? Why haven't people been arrested for participating in the summer 2020 riots? Just wondering. Why did the U.S. rejoin the United Nations? He goes on for this. Why is the world pushed to trial a vaccine that neither prevents nor stops the transmission of COVID? Why are people being removed from social media platforms for expressing their own thoughts? Just wondering. He goes on from there about this. And it gets into the issue.
Why do college students dislike America?
Yeah.
Why did we go from energy independence to relying on adversaries to provide our energy?
Yeah.
Why have we resisted election transparency?
Why are we
witnessing the highest crime rate since the 90s?
Yeah.
Again, it goes on. And again, it's as if we are divorced from reality.
Yes.
And again, I think there has to be a call for working people and people of faith, broadly, people of faith, to speak the truth. Andrew,
this gets to my question, which is this idea of well, here's the problem. I'm going to offer the question, and I'm going to say here's what the problem is. Because the question is, what happens when more and more people recognize that objective truth is being destroyed? Sam Brintons of the world can serve in government and no one bats an eye, or we trade a basketball player for an arms dealer and no one bats an eye. The problem, of course, then comes in when objective truth is silenced on the major social media platforms, or people are arrested or sanctioned in some way for expressing that objective truth. And then 10 years from now, when the young people who are being taught, 10 years, 20 years from now, when the young people who are being taught that America is an evil place, that we need to revisit the Constitution, when there's no dissent, I think I posted this on Twitter today. Someone pointed out in response to the latest revelations from Twitter, well, of course, all scientists agree, or it looks like all scientists agree on X, Y, and Z, because the major platforms are suppressing dissenting scientific views.
Look, health policy is something you and I talk about a lot. And the fact of the matter is, all through COVID, the government and social media and corporations colluded to keep information, by the way, in retrospect, we know was accurate, was scientific. And again, maybe we wouldn't have suffered through COVID the way we did.
Right.
Again,
it suffered health-wise and mental health-wise, physical health-wise, mental health-wise, and economics-wise.
Look, just to throw something out for our listeners. So there's a recent study, Stanford University, where adolescent minds, their brains, because of COVID, the COVID protocols, pre-COVID, post-COVID CT scans. The average teenager, adolescent brain has aged, has greater than. So a 14-year-old's brain is now actually aged like a 19 or 20-year-old. And they say this: the brain, the imaging, the science behind it, it mirrors what abuse victims go through.
Sure.
And so again, we have done physical, psychological, educational damage to our children, child abuse. And again, there's been no reckoning of this.
Yes.
Teacher unions are still held in high regard. They should be disbanded. Public school systems should be closed down. And we should start again. I mean, in terms of our kids.
I want to circle back to this, which is, something that we have talked about in the past, which is this issue, because it is breaking in the news. We had the second round. We've now had 2 rounds.
Sure. Now, Barry Weiss now has Twitter Files 2, and it's, again, read the thread. I mean, it's up at Real Clear Politics. I'm putting it up over at Real Clear Health. And again, the reason why I'm putting it up at Real Clear Health is because of the censorship of science and medicine and health issues during COVID.
But it gets down to what we now know is that there was the active collusion between the Democrats and Twitter in the 2020 election. We know that there was active collusion between the Biden administration and Twitter after Biden took office. We now know that there was active collusion between the various entities, the FBI, the CDC, et cetera, and social media over these activities. I mean, I'll say this, right? I mean, again, not that we want to place too much of an emphasis on any one man, right? We don't know what Twitter is going to look like with Elon Musk at the helm. But we do know that we have now this issue of now knowing more and having our suspicions about Twitter being confirmed. And you can't place too much of an emphasis on this. I know that I have suspected I've been shadow banned for a very long time. I can't prove it, All I can speak about is the anecdotes. But now I know, for instance, that there were Jerry. I mean, for those of you who haven't followed this story, what Barry Weiss put out last night were screenshots of it's not a platform, of the interface that people at Twitter, inside Twitter, could have in terms of the various restrictions they can put on accounts. People we know, like Bongino, where it was active that his tweets would not be promoted, and that you couldn't find what he was saying if you weren't actively looking for it. This is a huge issue. Anyway, it can't be understated.
The left wants to remake culture, society.
Yes.
And Barack Obama spoke openly about it. It's funny. So we went into the district, DC this week, had dinner together, and my girls went to a concert in DC. Anyway, on the way in, I'm talking to my 13-year-old, and she's, she likes to kind of play games, and she'll say something that she knows will get a reaction from me.
Sure.
And we were driving through DC, and I said, there's the Washington Monument, there's the Jefferson Memorial, and she said to me, "Oh, Dad, dead white males." She was joking.
Yes.
But I did ask her. I said, "Well, you know what?" I said, what are you reading? What are you hearing on social media about America's founding and America's founders?" And my 16-year-old said, "Grace, don't answer them. It'll be a big thing." So I said, "Well, I know." I asked the question. I know the answer to it, sweetheart. I said, "But look," I said, "what culture did not engage in genocide or slavery? Or again, America gets singled out, and the reason is because America is also the last best hope for mankind, for humankind. So again, indigenous peoples that we want to put on a pedestal, engaged in genocide and slavery. I love it that a UK official, during when the Queen passed away, was asked by a reporter, "Well, don't you think the empire, or don't you think there's a responsibility to pay reparations for slavery?" And she and surprisingly, she said, "Yes, we should go to those African states and African leaders and slave traders in Africa, and we should ask them for reparations."
Yeah.
And no one ever thought of that. I mean, in terms of how slavery, the slave trade, how it was employed, it wasn't just a European enterprise; it was a worldwide enterprise. My point is this: it was America, specifically in the 1776 and the Revolutionary War. It was America that said stop.
Yeah.
It was America and American principles that said, not perfectly at first, and it took a process, but all men are created equal. Yes. That you are endowed by your creator with certain rights.
Let me take
right.
Let me take a next step and tie it back in with everything we've been talking about in terms of society and the collapse of society, or the impending collapse of society, the ongoing erosion of society. And Russia. What we are seeing today is the fruits of seeds that were planted in the 1950s and 1960s. That when Nikita Khrushchev said, and he didn't say "we will bury you," he said "we will be at your funeral." What Nikita Khrushchev was saying, knowing full well what was going on, was that one of our goals in terms of foreign policy vis-a-vis the United States and other Western European societies, is to use the tools and the attributes of Western civilization, Western democratic society, against those societies, and to pull at threads. America has free speech. We're going to use free speech against America. And what you are seeing now are planting the seeds of Soviet interference with American society in the late 1960s and into the 1970s. The erosion of religion, the erosion of the family, the erosion of sexual morality, all of those things. And so, who is beaming right now are the Lavrenti Berias of the world, the Nikita Khrushchevs of the world, They are smiling. The Stalins of the world are smiling at what at the ability that they had over the years, and I'm going to add to this China and Maoist China to unravel these things. Anyway, that's sort of
no, but you're right, and it's interesting. Again, a couple of good pieces
real quick, Jerry, because we're running low on time here.
Well, on Real Clear Policy, that America's response to China's actions in the world won't suffice.
Yeah,
I mean, China is our geopolitical opponent,
100%.
and we're not engaging in geopolitics in the way that the Chinese are, and we're going to get beat.
Yeah,
Yes. If we're not careful. So again, 50 years from now, who knows? Maybe my dad was right. My dad told me as a kid, learn computers and learn Chinese.
Yes.
Maybe
Yes,
we'll
it wasn't just saying
Chinese.
So you could order food at the corner restaurant.
No,
Jerry, when are you on the air next week?
Well, Sunday, of course, the Jerry Rogers Show. And,
Sunday must be Jerry.
And then I think Thursday.
Yes,
Thursday. What's the date?
Okay, Thursday. Well, Thursday is the 15th.
All right, 15th.
I am in for Larry O'Connor all next week on the O'Connor and Company show on WMAL. You can find it online, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern time. It's going to be chock-a-block of fun. Obviously, we'll have a new episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World next week, as well as the Lunch Hour podcast. And point of fact, next week's Lunch Hour podcast has an obscure figure from DC politics and policy. You might have heard of him. His name is Jerry Rogers. He is the editor
and it's a
of Real
very
Clear
uplifting conversation, unlike this conversation. This was
conversation.
Now, just as a reminder to our listeners, this was Festivus.
Yes,
this was the airing.
I got a lot of problems with you people,
and I was in character for that for this conversation.
Better, Jerry? It sounds like you've had a bit of a catharsis there.
Well,
are you seething under, or are you still seething under your skin that we are disagreeing? No,
I don't. No, I'm fine with that. I just think that that we're in trouble, and I wish I
agree with you.
I wish my side would fight. Again, we didn't mention this much, but Senator Simina. Declares herself to be an independent. And again, if Republicans had done the right thing, again, everything could be different right now. I think this 2024, 2028, and then the next 3 election cycles is the last hope to save America. That's right. What I think.
We've got a goal. We've got a golden opportunity. In fact, it's not even golden. It's an essential opportunity that we need to be engaged and better at this. Jerry, what do you want folks to do?
Find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm.
Have a great week, everybody. Happy Festivus, and by all means, please stay safe.